Okay, so we're now going to demonstrate creating a custom report using the Template Studio, and we'll also take this opportunity to explain how to add mobile responsive views into a report template. So I'll come back into the Template Studio, create a new template. I'll call this one the Energy Report, and it represents a weekly summary of the generator performance of a couple of power generators. And I'm going to use the import template option, which allows me to select an existing Excel workbook on my system rather than starting with a blank file. So I'll come into my templates area, select my energy generation file. And you can see this one is a weekly report. We have daily summary values for the ambient wind speed at this kind of wind farm generator, and the output of the two different generator units in kilowatt hours. And this might be something that typically somebody could be filling out manually. And when they do that, you can see the charts and formula objects all come to life there. So what we're going to do is use an XLReporter data connection to drive this dynamically, so a user can open up their web browser, select a date on a calendar control on their PC or on their phone, and just drive all this automatically as a live dashboard. How do we add an XLReporter data connection into the template? We use the Connect menu, and then we select the connector we want to use, which in this case is the historian. And this interface just lets us select some data we want to get out of the historian and map it into a location in the template. So I'll add a new group using this ellipse button here next to name. And then because what I need is the daily, min, and max and total, I'm going to use a summary values connection. And what we want to do is have the timestamp, which is the first column, placed in B, skip over a row, and then add the 4 columns for the process KPI. So I'll actually skip down to the second row on the columns tab. And actually I don't really have some good energy tags inside my simulator, unfortunately, but because it's a simulator, we can just call the tags anything. So say hypothetically this is the wind speed column, the first one. This is another wind speed tag column. And then we have generator 1 kilowatt hours and generator 2 kilowatt hours. Now, since this column is going to be high and this one's low, we'll set the calculation to max and then minimum for these two. And then because we'll say my generator columns are accumulator values in the PLC that reset daily, we'll take the last value of the day for those. Now in the time period tab, we can map the timing of this so that based on what the user selects for the calendar control, it will show that week, and then it will also show the daily summaries, so we'll get back 7 rows. And we can test that using the preview mode here. So you can see I ran for the 10th, and we get the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Now what I'd really like to do is, instead of locking it to Sunday, is allow the report to show the 7 days leading up to the day that the user selects. So it's important to know how to configure the time period settings in these groups. To do that, we would change the type from relative to offset, and the duration is still going to be 1 week. We don't want to start on Sunday anymore, but we want to go back 6 days on that offset. So if the user picks the 10th, it will show the 7 days leading up to and including the 10th. And let's just test that in preview. So now we run the 10th, and we get the 4th through the 10th. So basically, the user's calendar control selection ends up being the last day of the report. So now I'll save this group. We can just call it Energy Report after the template. The default naming convention is fine. And then I'm going to place it into cell B10, so the content that you just saw in the preview is going to land in these cells and then drive all of the workbook features dynamically. And now the next thing I want to go over in this template is the mobile responsive view of this report. And in XLReporter, the responsive views are based on the worksheet configuration. So if I come down here to the bottom where I have the report tab named, I can unhide the report small sheet. And now XLReporter supports small, medium, and large views. And to indicate that a particular sheet is the small view like a phone or the medium view like a tablet, you just have to append the name with _small or _medium respectively. On large displays like a desktop, all visible or unhidden sheets are displayed, which is why report was the only visible sheet by default when we imported the file. Now, how is the content of these small and medium sheets laid out? Well, it just uses workbook cell references to point back at the report sheet in this case. And that's kind of a best design practice for adding mobile responsive views, because you really only want to configure the actual nuts and bolts of the data connection of the report once, and we do that for the default view, which is for large displays. The report small sheet, if you look, has some of the same information that's just kind of been streamlined for what is conceivable to display on one page, I guess, if you will, of a phone screen. So we've kind of streamlined some of the key content from the report sheet, but it gets there just by using cell references. So, for example, this chart series is just pointed over at this area. And then some of these formulas, if you take a look, this one's just pointed at, say, report K7. And if we look at report K7, you can see that that cell is the weekday energy usage. So you don't have to design a second template entirely. Basically, you just design one view and then use cell references to create the other views. And as for the actual layout of this sheet, that's all controlled. How it's going to display in the web portal is all controlled by the page setup parameters, just like it would be if you were printing the report or saving it to a PDF. The view inside of the web client follows all the same principles. So if I come into the page setup for this one, you can see that it's zoomed in, and that's because in printed documents and things that adhere to the page setup, the workbook engine is going to want to display the content kind of at a default density, like for printed documents. So what you would do is just kind of adjust the width and the zoom so that you maximize the display space. Another option you may want to take here, if you have more than one page, is if you want to make scrolling content where a user can use their thumb to scroll up and down on the phone, you would just want to lock the page width to 1 page wide in that case. Since this one only fills a single screen display area, I just used the zoom. And you can see in the preview here that this is what the report will look like on a mobile phone. So it fills the display area of the phone's screen completely. And of course, you'll want to use a portrait orientation for that as well. Now, the next thing that we'll want to take a look at before we run this in the web client is how the user is going to enter in the date for the report. All of those things are handled in the on-demand designer, which is sort of a mapping between the variable aspects of the report, in this case the date and time, and how the user is going to enter them using controls. Now, because we imported the template that had multiple worksheets, XLReporter does a little bit of predictive work in the design tools, and it thinks, okay, the user is going to want to pick which sheet they're updating in the report. In this case, since we're using a responsive report, and we're driving everything off of the large view, we want to take away the control for worksheet, and we want to force the report to update instead of this worksheet variable that the user picked. We'll force it to update the report sheet. Now I'm going to hide this sheet again, save the template, and if I go into the web client and we look at it in desktop mode, you can see on the entity report, I'll pick a date here. Let's say 8/12, and you can see we get the desktop view of the report this way. If I then go back and shrink the browser down, go back into the same report, we can see that we're now seeing that report _small sheet. And so it really is that simple, basically. Instead of having to work with web technology and designing responsive web pages yourself, you just use the skills you already know from Microsoft Excel to just build a view you'd like to display on desktop and then build one that you want to display on mobile.